Google, Facebook, all examples of dropouts of even undergraduate education, let alone graduate education. So how to advocate against that environment? And secondly is the trend in the dichotomy or the merging of taught versus research postgraduate education, whether in order to equip yourself, it's actually better to get a professional doctorate or taught degree versus a research degree exemplified by a PhD.
So let me speak to the, speak to the first. There certainly are examples like Michael Dell of individuals who have founded major companies who have actually been undergraduate dropouts. There are other examples, which would be the majority of the people who don't have advanced degrees, who actually were in PhD programs, and in the course of their PhD program got so sidetracked by their companies that they were developing, very entrepreneurial companies, that the company took precedence. In all of those cases, those people hire PhDs all the time. So it's like people who say in America, we have some people in America now who are saying, we have too many college-educated people, Obama has this goal of having 60% of the population with undergraduate degrees. We don't need that. We need more plumbers and so on. And of course, what I say to them is, well, is your son a plumber? Did you send your daughter to college? Well, of course. My daughter, of course, goes to college. And of course, no, my son is in law school. But I'm talking about these other people's children. Well, you just look at who they hire. And they hire PhDs. They hire advanced master's degrees. They hire people with graduate degrees. And so, the numbers just speak for themselves. If you look at the average annual earnings in the United States, at every degree level, the average annual earnings go up significantly. So that the gap, for example, between a high school graduate and a PhD is $120 million in average annual earnings over a lifetime. So, it makes a difference. It's just a huge difference because the market shows that. The second issue is really an interesting issue because, there's this kind of radical dichotomy that doesn't make so much sense in the United States, but makes that I hear about all the time in Europe, between the taught PhD, which is a professional degree, and the research PhD, in which there are no courses. Well, they're moving in Europe to a blend of these. And the U.S. model, which is a little different because, remember, for the PhD, you don't have to have a master's degree in the United States. So people come in to complete undergraduate and can enter a PhD program without a master's degree. So that if you think about the master's component as being organized coursework, and the rest a combination of some intensive coursework in some fields and the rest research, then it looks like the combination of a taught master's and a research PhD, which is sort of the U.S. model. The thing that is emerging now are these professional development courses that are really not in the field, but really equip you to be more effective in a variety of domains. And I think the reality is it's linked to what students ultimately do. Even if someone is ultimately going to be a professor, there are things that are to be learned about being a more or less successful professor. The way I learned to teach, and I expect the way you learned to teach, Paul, was watching other people teach. I mean, you were taught, so that, well, that's actually not how we learn most things. There are principles that can be actually taught that are more efficient. And so even if you're going to be a professor, there are professional development opportunities that would strengthen the student's capacity and ultimate success. The problem is, it's this efficiency-effectiveness trade-off, because what we cannot do is make time to degree longer. So we have to figure out what is the best blend of professional development, deep research training, and taught coursework that leads to student success.
Mordechai Goldman, I'm the Associate Vice President for Postgraduate Studies at UST. And so there are a couple of questions. You mentioned process. And one thing that I've really noticed over the past 20 years is the process is changing dramatically in a way that we would not like when we view it. And that's because professors have a lot of stress, a lot of pressure on them to produce more research. So what they've done is they've taken the PhD, which often had a breadth component at the very beginning, and they've tried to get rid of that. They've tried to remove that so that the students can do more research. And that, from what I'm hearing from you, is not correct, because that's taking away training from the students that will help them get better jobs outside of academia later. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, we have exactly the same situation in the United States. The pressure on faculty today in the United States is just, especially in science and engineering. Yeah, it's a STEM issue primarily. Well, there are other issues in the humanities. The humanities, the issue is just neglect. You know, if you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. We get along fine, and then it's terrible. But STEM has a different driver. I mean, STEM's driver is money, and it's the fact that STEM faculty in U.S. universities really have to support themselves. I mean, that's and not so much. I mean, they do because that's how excellence is demonstrated. Because they apply for competitive grants, they get competitive grants. So this is, to me, a very important role of the graduate school, because it is absolutely critical that there be university standards and aspirations and goals that someone is articulating and someone is working with the faculty to try to advance. Because the pressures on the other side are pretty strong. They're financial. And so it's a matter of trying to ensure that you build into promotion and tenure, looking at the mentoring capability and behaviors of faculty. And that's the kind of the direction, because you can't, we're not going to change the fact that large research grants are the basic funding scheme for universities. We're not going to change the fact that excellence is measured in part by individual faculty's capacity to get those grants. What we have to do is build into performance expectations something beyond simply generating X number of articles. And one way we're doing it is by working through the funding agencies. So now the National Science Foundation, for example, is taking very seriously a proposal that we've talked to them about for looking more holistically at student success who are on research grants. And so if the funders begin to build this into their evaluation criteria, then the faculty will follow, I think, rather quickly.
Quick follow-up then, because one thing that I'm never able to get out of your data, and because I don't think anybody asked this data, is whether in most American graduate schools, students are recruited by the department into a pool, and then their advisor is chosen afterwards, or if they're recruited directly by faculty. Because those really have implications as to what the graduate school can do with the students before the students start receiving pressure from the faculty.
Okay, both are true. I mean, there are, even within a university, let me back up. There's always the written down procedure, how we say it works. And how, in every university, how we say it works is the student applies, the application will typically come through some central processing like the graduate school. go to the department or the program. Increasingly today, it's not so much departments as programs and go to the program, and then there's a structure in the program for rank ordering the students, and then the rank ordering always has to do also with whether or not there is financial support. So they tend not to admit students who they can't support, and then the recommendation comes back to the graduate school to admit the person. So that's how it is on paper. In fact, in some programs, faculty individually recruit students to get engaged in this process. In some programs, once the students get there, the only way they can be admitted is if some faculty member speaks up for them and says, I want that student in my laboratory. I say admit the student and I'll support him. So it really varies at the program level which is why there are no data. I mean, that both of the scenarios that you describe happen, even though almost all universities will have on paper the scenario that I described. But what graduate schools are trying to do is say, basically, however the student got there. Because we think the program is really the best place to make the decision about which students are the best match for the program. But once the student gets there, then that student should have the opportunity for this particular set of range of exposure to professional development and so on. And as you know, we have an advisory committee system. So it's not just one person, but it's 3 or 4 sometimes person committee that oversees with one main mentor the student's progress.
T.C. Pong from the Research Grants Council. There's a trend in Europe to set up the double PhD programs. That means students can get 2 PhD degrees from 2 different universities. Usually they are international partners. I think that's a good way to establish real research collaboration. But the U.S. university seems to be quite slow in doing that. Can you share with us your view on?
Right. We've done some research on this, and there remains fairly strong resistance in many American university faculties to do what they consider to be giving 2 degrees for one body of work. And one problem is, this is why I think a dual degree scheme works better for America, where you can distinguish the separate work that was done for, you do X body of work and then you get a second degree for this additional work. But there is this kind of resistance in many American universities to do what is called double counting. And we're actually doing a lot of work now trying to look at the double counting arrangements that do work, and then help our universities understand more about, because it's frankly the graduate schools that will always stop these. It's the graduate schools that always stop them, because it's a quality control issue. So in some ways, a joint degree is a much better answer, because then you really do have the 2 faculties coming together, jointly deciding what works best. The faculties are integrated, the work is focused. But joint degrees are hard to pull off for different reasons because of the larger regulatory environment in which each degree is located. So you've got to get approval, all these governmental approvals to do joint degrees, whereas dual degrees, you typically don't have to get them. But I will have to say the United States is not a leader in this area. We're still trying to find our path.
thanking Dr. Stewart for her insights and her wonderful.
Thank you all for coming. If you'd like to stay and visit for a few minutes, please do.
Professor Tam, yeah.
Oh, how
Yeah.
lovely. How exciting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me take my glasses off here. That was just so that I could see people. Oh, that's lovely.
Thank you.
Top of my desk.
Thank you very much.